This video is meant for people who are trying to learn double zap combos in Corporate Clash, but we'll also go over how zap works in general and what single zap can do. We'll try our best to explain as well as possible while being in depth as possible. We will also go over the basic rules of zap and then explain each of the basic combos, and most importantly, how to identify a zap combo. One question you might ask yourself: why zap? Why use zap when I can use sound? They're both AoEs, right? They both hit all the cogs, right? The truth is, you don't use zap in the same situations as you use sound. They're different tools meant for different sets of cogs. This is a common misconception of many players, both new and old. Sound is so much better when the cogs are of an even or similar level. Take this set for example. 3 level 15s and a level 14 is an easy 4 prestige fog set. However, take this set. A level 17, 15, 11, and 10 is a perfect TV Tesla set. In order to sound that set, you need to use 4 prestige operas, and for 1 cog, I don't think that's worth it. So now that we explained why you should zap sometimes over sound, let's get into how zap works and what you can use zap for. Zap goes left, left. Remember that. If you can't go left anymore, then it goes right. You know how I remember my rights and lefts? I write with my right hand. My right hand is to the right. You see where I'm going with this? Let's begin with our first clip of zap. We can see how a single zap will behave in a set of 4 cogs. As you see here, the rabbit will zap the middle right cog. Remember, zap, if given a choice between left or right, will always deviate left. Get that tattooed on your arm if you need to remember it. In the clip, the joy buzzer shocks the middle right cog, then proceeds to jump to the middle left cog. And to end off, it zaps the far left cog, with damage decreased after each jump. Now that we've seen zap in action, what happens when we zap a cog and runs out of jumps on the left side? In this second clip, the kangaroo will taser the middle left cog. The first jump behaves as normal, jumping to the left cog. But because there is not another cog on the left to jump to, the final jump will transfer over to the cog on the right of the initially tasered cog.
Hopefully you've noticed, but the initial target cannot be jumped to by the same zap gag. This leads to our next rule. A cog can only have zap jump to it once, and they must be at most 2 spaces away. Before I explain the jumping once mechanic, let me explain the spaces. Now what defines a space, you may ask? A space is just a space in between 2 cogs as shown here. In this example here, even though the mid left cog isn't right next to the far right cog, zap will still jump as the mid left cog is still 2 spaces away from the far right cog. Now let me explain the jump once mechanic. In this clip here, I know that the spin doctor won't die to this combo, but for science I will let it live so you can understand better what I mean when I say a cog can only be jumped to once. Look right there. Even though the spin doctor is next to the cog that got directly hit with the TV skips over him and goes straight to the 9 EXE and then the 9, because the taser, which went first, already jumped to the spin doctor. Also, hopefully you've noticed, but zap can still jump onto a cog that has been directly hit by a previous zap gag. So, the TV damage will still jump onto the 9 EXE because the 9 EXE was only directly hit with the taser, and not a taser's jump. If you still don't understand it, here's another way to look at it. Let's say we have 2 Prestige Teslas. Prestige Tesla does 198 damage to the initial target, 165 to the second, and 132 to the third. In double zap combos, you would only be able to add 198 plus 165 or 198 plus 132 in terms of the damage you can deal to a single cog. You would never ever add 165 plus 132 or etc. With a Prestige Tesla and a broken TV, you can only add 198 plus 100, 198 plus 80, or 120 plus 165. Keep in mind, however, you wouldn't get 120 plus 132 because in most zap combos, the final jump of the highest or second zap gag hits the farthest right cog. This brings us to our next rule.
The lower level zap gag will always go first. If two toons use the same zap gag, then the toon position to the farthest right goes first. So, if you noticed in the previous clip, Crazy used a TV and a taser. However, because the taser is a lower level zap gag, it will always go before the TV. Now, if two toons are using the same zap gag, the toon positioned to the farthest most right, as shown in the clip here, will go first. This is where the terms cross and straight come from. Cross meaning that the toons make a cross on their targeting, and straight meaning a straight parallel line with their targeting. You can also say when crossing, the lower level zap gag, or the one going first, is to the left of the higher or second zap gag. So let's say you have 4 cogs here, and the toon on the far right zaps the mid left cog, while the toon on the far left zaps the mid right cog. They essentially create a cross with their targeting. If the toon on the far right instead zaps the mid right cog, and the toon on the far left zaps the mid left cog, they create a straight line with their targeting instead. Those are the basic rules done. Now it's time to go into the actual combos. Before I do that though, let me explain real quick the gist of every basic double zap combo. In almost every double zap, the first zap used will destroy 1 cog and damage 2 cogs, while the second zap used will finish off the remaining 3. This, in combination with Prestige Squirt and Squirt damage, is what allows for these combos to exist.
Here we have our first double zap combo, X dash X dash. So in this combo, the first or weaker zap has to target the mid right cog first, and the mid left cog needs to die to the first zap. The second or stronger zap has to target the far left cog and will finish off the remaining 3 cogs. Anyways, let's look at the first example. Oh, oops, that's the wrong clip, my bad. Alright guys, here's the first real example, I promise. We have a level 15 Advocate, a 15, 14 EXE, and a 12. Based on the chart shown before, this is a perfect Tesla set. Remember, in this combo, the first zap has to hit the mid right cog, and the second zap has to hit the far left cog. Because we are using the same zap gag here, the rabbit and the deer make sure to not cross. The mid left cog needs to die to the first zap, so seeing as the 15 will get hit by 165 damage from the first Tesla, we need to use a geyser to soak the left 3 cogs and to get the 15 below that threshold. The far right cog gets hit with 132 damage, so we will use a hose to soak and damage it. Now, let's watch this combo unfold. So here's our second example. We have a 12 EXE, a 12, another 12 EXE, and an 11. Now you might be asking, why didn't we sound here? Well, that's because we had a soundless. At least we have zap. Also, something to note, 12 EXEs and level 15s are pretty much perfect HP for TV Tesla combos, which is great for when you don't have fogs or if it's not worth to sound. Here, the TV does 100 damage to the mid left cog. Stormcloud is 2 damage off from bringing it below 100, so we need to use a geyser. If any of the Clash game designers are watching this, please buff Stormcloud to 82 damage. It makes no sense that we need to use a geyser on a level 12 just for a TV jump. Anyways, let's continue. The Tesla will go after the TV, killing off the rest of the cogs. Level 11 will take 132 damage, so it needs a seltzer to go below that threshold. Let's see this in action.
In XX-, the first or weaker zap has to target the mid-left cog first, and the mid-right cog needs to die to the first zap. The second or stronger zap has to target the far left cog, and will finish off the remaining 3 cogs. This is our first XX-, example. Here is a 13 EXE, 12 EXE, 11, and a 10. This is a perfect TV Tesla set. In XX-, the mid-right cog has to die to the first zap, so because this is TV Tesla, the TV will always go first. Here, the TV will do 120 damage to the 12 EXE, 100 damage to the 13 EXE, then it will swing around and deal 80 damage to the level 11. 156 minus 80 is 76, so we need a storm cloud on it for it to die to the TV and to soak the right 3 cogs. The Tesla goes after the TV, dealing 198 to the 13 EXE, 165 to the 12 EXE, and finally 132 to the level 10. The 12 EXE and 10 are already below the damage threshold, but the 13 EXE isn't. Since it is taking 198 damage from the Tesla and 100 from the TV, we need to get its damage below 298 and soak it. So, a water balloon is the minimum gag required. Now let's see this combo in action. In our second example of XX-, we have a level 14, level 13, level 11, and a weakened level 11 EXE. We attempted to sound and drop in the previous turn, but unfortunately the drop missed, so he survived. You can basically pretend that the 11 EXE is now level 7. Because the 11 EXE is below 80 HP, this now becomes a perfect double TV set. It's important to remember, when doing either XX-, or -XX-, middle priority, straight with 2 TVs, you're dealing 220 damage to 2 cogs, which if you think about it, is kind of insane for it to only be a level 6 gag, right? The other cogs, meanwhile, will only take 80 damage from the zap. So just like the last example, there is a level 11 mid-right, so we will Storm Cloud him to bring him below 80. The level 14, on the other hand, has 240 HP, so to bring him below 220, the weakest squirt gag we can use is a water balloon. The toons are using the same zap gag, so they make sure not to cross. Let's see it in action.
In -XX- straight, also known as middle priority straight, the first or weaker zap has to target the mid-right cog first, and the far left cog needs to die to the first zap. The second or stronger zap has to target the mid-left cog, and will finish off the remaining 3 cogs. In this example here, we have a level 10, 19, 18, and a 16, with the right 3 cogs being Prestige Lord. This set is definitely not soundable, and you obviously don't want to use fogs and operas in the first round of a CEO anyway. Thankfully, we have Zap. The most important thing that makes this cog set zappable is the far right cog being Lord. With Lightning, the far right cog will take 160 damage. However, even with a Geyser, 160 plus 115 is still less than 306. Because the cog is Lord, however, our Geyser will deal enough damage to bring it below the 160 threshold. If it was a level 15 instead, however, the far right cog being Lord wouldn't matter. So here we're using a Lightning and a Tesla, and in this combo, remember that the far left cog has to die to the first zap. The level 10 is already the perfect health to die from Tesla, so we're able to squirt the level 19 to bring it below the damage threshold. The 19 will take 165 from the Tesla and 240 from the Lightning, totaling up to 405 damage from Zap. The minimum squirt we'll need to use is a water balloon, but because he's lured, you can actually even use a squirt gun. Here's the zap combo in action. Here's our second example, and wow, we've got some beefy cogs. Two 19 EXEs and two 7 EXEs. This is where Prestige Lure really comes in handy. Zap can still synergize with Lure due to the bonus damage given to the squirt gags. Middle priority straight lightnings do 440 damage to the middle two cogs, so if we geyser them both under Prestige Lure, it brings them exactly to that number. Also, the cogs on the side take 160 damage each. Since they're both 7 EXEs, they're already well below that number. Remember, since the toons are both using the same zap gag, they're required to do straight. The toons have to make sure not to cross. Let's see these beefy cogs die to zap.
In dash XX dash cross, the first or weaker zap has to target the mid left cog first, and the far left cog needs to die to the first zap. The second or stronger zap gag has to target the mid right cog and will finish off the remaining 3 cogs. If the lower level zap gag targets a cog to the left of the higher one, it's crossing. As you can see here, crossing shifts some of the damage from the mid right cog to the far left one. This combo is useful for when the far left cog has more HP than normal and the mid right cog is weaker than the mid left cog, but still beefy. In our first example, we have a 14, 14 EXE, 13 EXE, and a 12. This is a perfect cross Tesla set. The right 2 cogs are lured, however, even if they weren't, it would not make much of a difference. You could also do straight here instead of cross. However, you would need to geyser the far left level 14 to bring it down below 132. However, since we are crossing, the far left cog will take 165 damage instead. So, we can save our geyser and use a storm cloud. The mid right cog will take 330 damage instead of 363. But the 13 EXE is already below that threshold, so it'll work out. The far right cog still takes 132 damage, and because he is prestige lured, we can use a seltzer, which will deal exact damage. If he was not lured, you would use a hose instead, which is why the 2 cogs being lured doesn't really make much of a difference. In our last example, for a guide, we have an 11, 15 EXE, 14, and another 14. This is another good cross Tesla set. The 15 EXE needs to be brought below 363 HP, so we will use a hose to damage it and soak the left 3 cogs. As you can see here, since we need to hit the 15 EXE, and the far left cog is a level 11, it's required to cross here, as straight Teslas will have the level 11 live. The far right level 14 will take 132 damage, so we need to use a geyser to damage and soak it. Okay, so let's summarize. Zap goes left. If it can't go left anymore, then it goes right. A cog can only have Zap jump to it once. They must be at most 2 spaces away. If you had, for example, the far left and far right cogs being the only ones soaked, Zap would still not jump as they're 3 spaces away. And then lastly, the lower level Zap gag will always go first. But if 2 toons use the same Zap gag, then the toon position to the farthest right goes first. As for some tips and tricks, in cog facilities, like offices or golf courses, in order to make the cog set zappable, you generally talk to the lowest level / HP cog. The cog you talk to is who ends up on the far right, and in most of our examples, the far right cog usually doesn't take as much damage from the zap as the other cogs. So, it is usually ideal if the lowest HP cog is on the right. And so in general, if you're looking at a cog set and you think it's zappable, ask yourself, can we soak all 4 cogs while damaging them enough to make them below a threshold? In general, Zap may seem complicated at first, but after using it consistently, it becomes super easy and fast to use. When I was first learning Zap, it would probably take around 20 seconds for me to figure out if a cog set was zappable. Now as soon as I see the cogs come out, I instantly know what zap combo to use, or if we can't zap it. In my opinion, the best way to practice is doing 4-man CFOs or other 4-man bosses. However, CFO is the most fun and it's usually quick, so that's what I would recommend. Regardless, I hope this video has helped you a lot in learning how to use Zap properly. Zap is so fun to use, and honestly, I feel bad for anyone who's squirtless zapless because of how fun it is to use Zap. It completely changed the game for me, and I hope it does for you as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.